The night I learned my wife and the two children I had raised for 12 years were discussing whether I was worth saving, I was upstairs in our guest room with an oxygen tube under my nose and a plastic cup sitting 6 inches beyond my reach. My stepson said, "Mom, you cannot drain the house for a $60,000 maybe." My stepdaughter answered, "He has had a good life. You still have us." Then my wife, the woman who had promised me in the hospital that money did. "I know. I just do not want him to think I gave up on him." I could hear forks touching plates through the smart home intercom beside my bed. I could hear someone open the refrigerator. I could hear them decide how to make me feel loved, while quietly deciding not to risk money to keep me alive. What none of them knew was that the intercom had been left on because I had reached for it to ask for water. What they also did not know was that the one thing in my life I had never shared, borrowed against, or used to rescue somebody else could be sold by morning. 3 months later, at Thanksgiving, my stepson asked me to guarantee a loan for his restaurant. My stepdaughter handed me a wedding budget, and my wife smiled like the worst night of my life had become family history we were all supposed to forget. I set one old photograph beside the turkey, looked at the three people who had called me dad when they needed something, and said, "Before we discuss what I can do for you, we are going to discuss what you decided I was worth when you thought I could not hear you." My name is Robert Hayes. I was 57 years old when this happened, and for most of my adult life, I was the kind of man people describe with words that sound flattering until you realize they are also job descriptions. Dependable, steady, practical, generous. I own a custom cabinet and millwork company outside Greenville, South Carolina. Nothing flashy. We build kitchens, library walls, restaurant bars, reception desks, and the kind of built-in shelves people point at during house tours and say, "This changed the whole room." I started with a borrowed table saw in my father's garage when I was 31. By the time I met Diane, I had a 12-person shop, 3 installation vans, and enough work that my phone rarely stopped ringing before dinner. By 44, I had accepted that fatherhood was probably going to be something I watched other men do. Then Diane Mercer walked into my life with 2 children and the exhaustion of a single mother. Tyler was 15, Brooke 13, and their biological father lived in Florida and appeared mostly through inconsistent calls and money. The first time I met the kids, Tyler barely looked up from his phone, and Brooke asked whether I was one of Mom's temporary men. I laughed and promised pancakes the next Saturday. I kept making them for 12 years. You do not become a father in one dramatic moment. You become one in repetitions nobody photographs. I taught Tyler to drive, sat through wet soccer seasons, taught Brooke to sand furniture and change a tire, attended school conferences, paid for braces in classes, and became the man they called when something broke. When Tyler wanted to open a barbecue restaurant, I let him use a storefront I owned at less than half market rent and bought his first smoker. When Brooke built a bridal hair business, I converted our detached garage apartment into a rent-free studio. When she got engaged to Cole, I promised $20,000 toward the wedding. I did not keep score. That was a mistake. Not because generosity is foolish, but because constant generosity can start looking like weather. The rent stays low, Dad shows up, the emergency gets solved, and nobody asks where the rain comes from until it stops. I had one thing I did keep for myself. It was not a truck or a business account. It was a 30-foot wooden Chris Craft cabin cruiser my father and I had restored together on Lake Hartwell before he died. The boat was a 1,965 Constellation with mahogany sides and brass fittings. Dad bought it as a leaking shell, and for almost 8 years we spent Saturdays rebuilding it together. He died 6 months after we finally launched it. I named it June after my mother. Tyler learned to steer it. Brooke learned to swim from its stern, but it stayed the one thing attached to a man who loved me before I became useful to anyone else. A collector from Charleston named Walter Pierce had offered me $75,000 twice. Both times I told him the same thing. Not while I am breathing. The irony would have been funny if it had not hurt so much later. My heart problem began with stairs. I started getting winded at the shop, then one September afternoon collapsed while moving a Walnut Island top. At the hospital, a cardiologist told me I had severe valve disease and needed a complex repair soon. The specialist he trusted was in Cleveland, and because of the out-of-network structure, a $62,000 deposit was required to secure the earliest surgical date. I asked whether we could wait. The doctor said, "Mr. Hayes, I would not plan my next month around delay." Diane gripped my hand. "We will find it. I do not care if we borrow against the house." I believed her completely. She said she would speak to the bank the next morning. For once, let us take care of you. I nearly cried from gratitude. Betrayal does not only damage the present, it reaches backward and stains moments that felt safe when they happened. I came home for a few days of medication adjustment before traveling. I was weak enough that crossing the bedroom exhausted me. The upstairs guest room had an intercom connected to the kitchen, and on my first evening home, Diane ate downstairs with Tyler and Brooke. Their ordinary voices initially comforted me. Then my mouth went dry. I had finished the water on my nightstand and did not trust my legs enough to go downstairs. I reached for the intercom button. Before I pressed it, I heard Tyler say, "Mom, please tell me you did not sign anything at the bank." I stopped. Diane answered, "Not yet." Brooke said, "Thank God. I thought they were worried about interest rates." Then Tyler continued, "You cannot put the house back under debt for this. Robert is almost 60. Robert, he called me dad almost every day. In that kitchen, when he thought I could not hear, I was Robert." "What if he does not make it?" Tyler said. "Then you are left with a payment on a house that was almost paid off. And Brooke and I have to figure out how to help you." Brooke answered, "And the wedding is next spring." I know that sounds awful, but we already put deposits down based on what he promised. My hand stayed suspended over the intercom. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. Diane said quietly, "He is expecting me to fix this." Tyler said, "Because he always expects to be the provider. That does not mean you have to destroy your future proving loyalty." "He could sell the boat," Brooke said. "That boat is worth more than enough." Tyler laughed softly. "He would rather sell a kidney," Brooke said. "Then that tells you something. If he will not sell his toy to save his own life, why should Mom risk the house?" My chest tightened, and for one terrifying second, I wondered whether the heart failure was worsening right there. I breathed slowly the way the nurse had taught me. Downstairs, Diane said, "He loves that boat because of his father." Brooke answered, "And we love you. You still have a life after him." After him, I was alive upstairs. They had already moved Diane into the chapter after me. Tyler lowered his voice, almost gentle. "Mom, you have to think logically. 62 grand is a lot of money for a surgery with no guarantees. He has had a good life. He built the company. He got to be a dad with us. Nobody is saying we want him to die." Brooke said, "Obviously not. But there is a difference between wanting him alive and putting everyone else underwater to make it happen." Then Diane said the sentence that broke something I had spent 12 years building. "I know. I just do not want him to think I gave up on him." Nobody said, "Then do not give up." Tyler said, "Tell him the bank cannot approve it fast enough." Brooke added, "That is probably kinder." They were not deciding whether to help me. They were deciding which lie would let me die without making them feel cruel. I never pressed the button. My throat burned. I stared at the empty plastic cup and listened to the people I had fed, housed, taught, financed, and loved discuss the economics of my remaining heartbeat. About 40 minutes later, footsteps came upstairs. Diane entered carrying my medication but no water. She sat on the edge of the bed, touched my hair, and looked tired enough to make me hate myself for what I had heard. "How did the bank go?" I asked. My voice was rough. She looked directly into my eyes. "Not good. They said the paperwork cannot clear before Cleveland needs the deposit." "We tried, honey. There is just not enough time." I nodded. I wanted to ask which banker. I wanted to tell her I had heard Tyler's fork against the plate. Instead, I said, "Okay." She kissed my forehead. "We will keep calling around." "Could you bring me some water?" I asked. She blinked as if seeing the empty cup for the first time. "Of course." That glass of water arrived 45 minutes after my family finished deciding my life cost too much. I drank it slowly and understood something almost peaceful in its cruelty. They had taught me exactly how conditional my place in the family was. I waited until after midnight. Diane slept beside me in the guest room because she said she did not want me alone. I used my phone to text Walter Pierce. "Is your offer on June still real?" He responded 7 minutes later. "For you, always. Why?" I typed, "Need funds tomorrow. 75? He called immediately. I declined and texted, "Cannot talk. Health issue. Serious." He wrote back, 80. "I will arrange transport and cashier's check. You can buy her back from me at the same number anytime you want." I stared at that message. A man who owed me nothing offered more kindness in one text than my family had shown in an hour of dinner conversation. The next day, While Diane went to Brooke's studio to help with bridal appointments, Walter drove up from Charleston with a marine hauler and his son. I was sitting in a folding chair beside the dock at Lake Hartwell with an oxygen tank between my feet because I insisted on being there. Walter looked at me and stopped smiling. "Bobby, what the hell happened?" I told him enough. Not the kitchen conversation, just the surgery and deposit. He looked toward June. "You sure?" "No," I said, "but do it anyway." His son eased the boat onto the trailer. I watched sunlight move along the varnished mahogany while 8 years with my father rolled away from the dock. I remember Dad teaching me to countersink screws, drinking coffee from a chipped thermos, telling me a man should always build one thing in his life that does not need applause. I had believed June was that thing. It turned out selling her taught me the lesson better than keeping her. Walter handed me a cashier's check for $80,000. I cried after they left. Not loudly. I sat alone by the empty slip and let grief happen without turning it into a plan. Then I drove home with Marcus because the cardiologist had forbidden me from driving myself. Diane noticed the boat was gone that evening. Her face went blank. "Where's June?" "Sold." "What?" "I handled the deposit." She stared at me. "You sold your father's boat?" "Yes." "Robert, why would you do that without talking to me?" The question almost made me laugh. Time mattered. "We could have figured something out." I looked at her for a long moment. "Could we?" She looked away first. I flew to Cleveland with Diane and paid the deposit myself. The 6-hour surgery worked. Tyler texted, "Love you, Dad. Knew you would fight through it." Brooke sent flowers saying, "We still need you walking me down the aisle." There is a particular loneliness in surviving for people who had already calculated the cost of losing you. I returned home a week later and did not begin revenge. I began observation. Tyler asked about my recovery, then about financing a second restaurant location. Brooke brought soup, then asked for the next wedding installment. Diane told relatives, "We all pulled together." We had not. I had sold the last physical piece of my father because my family decided their future deserved protection more than mine. I waited to see whether guilt would produce change without exposure. It did not. 2 months after surgery, Tyler asked me to guarantee a $75,000 equipment loan so he could add a second smoker and remodel the dining room. "The bank likes your business history," he said. "It is just paperwork." Brooke sent me an updated wedding spreadsheet showing the budget had grown from $54,000 to $87,000. She highlighted a column labeled DAD, contribution, not Robert, not stepdad. Dad, when the spreadsheet needed money, my promised $20,000 had quietly become $35,000. Diane said we should do everything we can because Brooke only gets one wedding. I asked whether she had forgotten I also got one heart. She stared at me. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." Thanksgiving came in November, 11 weeks after my surgery. Diane wanted to host a family gratitude dinner to celebrate my recovery. She invited Tyler and his girlfriend Brooke and Cole, her sister, 2 cousins, and my shop foreman Marcus because, as she said, he had helped save Robert's life. I agreed. I wanted one thing from the dinner: accuracy. Every adult asking for my money needed to understand why the old arrangement was ending. That afternoon, Diane cooked turkey, Tyler brought smoked ribs, and Brooke arrived carrying centerpiece flowers she later mentioned cost $200. Everyone hugged me. They toasted surviving Cleveland. Diane said, "This year taught us family is everything." I nearly choked on water. We ate. Conversation became ordinary. Tyler described his expansion plans. Brooke discussed the seating chart. Then, before pie, Tyler said, "Since we are all here, I brought the bank packet. No rush, but they need the guarantee by next Friday." Brooke laughed. "Get in line. Dad still owes the venue another 10. Diane looked at me with the soft expression she used when asking me to be generous. "Maybe tonight is not the time." "Actually," I said, "tonight is perfect." I stood slowly because my chest still pulled when I moved too fast. I went to my office and returned with 3 things: a framed photograph of my father and me, standing beside June during the restoration, an envelope, and a small portable speaker. I placed the photograph beside the turkey platter. "Do you remember this?" Brooke smiled. "Grandpa and the boat," Tyler said. "Of course. I sold it for $80,000. Tyler looked uncomfortable. "We know." "Do you know why?" Diane answered. "Because the bank could not process the equity line in time." I looked at her. That is what you told me. Her face changed, very slightly. Tyler's fork stopped moving. Brooke looked at her mother. I continued. The night before I sold the boat, I reached for the kitchen intercom because I needed water. Silence moved across the table. Diane's skin went pale. Robert, I never pressed the talk button. Tyler sat back. Brooke whispered, "Oh my God." But the kitchen microphone was already transmitting. Nobody moved. I turned on the speaker. I had discovered during recovery that our intercom system automatically archives short audio clips when the upstairs unit was activated. I had not intentionally recorded them that night. The system had. I played only 25 seconds. Tyler's voice filled the dining room. 60? $2,000 is a lot of money for a surgery with no guarantees. He has had a good life. He built the company. He got to be a dad with us. Then Brooke. There is a difference between wanting him alive and putting everyone else underwater to make it happen. Then Diane. I just do not want him to think I gave up on him. I stopped the recording. Nobody spoke. Marcus stared at his plate. Cole looked at Brooke like he had never seen her before. Tyler's girlfriend quietly moved her hand away from his. Diane's sister covered her mouth. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. I heard the rest too, I said. The part where you decided to tell me the bank could not move fast enough. The part where Brooke said I should sell the boat before anyone risked the house. The part where all of you discussed Diane's life after me while I was still upstairs asking for water. Diane began crying. I was terrified. So was I. I thought you could die even if we borrowed the money. Yes. I was trying to protect the boys. They were 25 and 27. Tyler said, we were trying to protect Mom. I know. That is the problem. Nobody in that kitchen was protecting me. Brooke's eyes filled. Dad, I did not mean I wanted you to die. I know. Then why are you doing this? Because wanting me alive in theory is not the same thing as showing up when staying alive costs something. Tyler shook his head. This is insane. You listened to a private conversation when we were panicking, and now you are going to hold it over us forever? I almost smiled at the familiar structure. The betrayal becomes private. The reaction becomes the offense. No, I said. I am not holding it over you. I am changing what I provide based on what I learned. I handed Tyler the first letter. It was not from a lawyer. It was from me. Your restaurant lease renews in January. The new rent will be market rate. I am giving you 60 days notice. You can stay, negotiate, or move. I will not guarantee the equipment loan. His face went red. You are trying to kill my business. No, I am stopping my business from subsidizing yours. You said you believed in me. I did. I still hope you succeed. Then help me. I already did. He stared at me. So because I said something scared and stupid, 12 years mean nothing? 12 years mean I am not throwing you into the street tomorrow? 12 years are why I am giving you time and why I am speaking instead of disappearing. They do not mean I have to keep financing you after learning how you value me. Brooke was already crying before I turned to her. Your wedding contribution remains $20,000. That was my promise. I have already paid 18. I will pay the remaining 2 directly to the venue. Nothing beyond that. Dad, the revised budget is your revised budget. The florist alone is $7,000. Then choose fewer flowers. We already told people what the wedding is going to look like. People will survive. Her face twisted. You are punishing my wedding because you got your feelings hurt, Cole said quietly. Brooke, she snapped. Stay out of it. I looked at the woman I had helped raise from 13. I was waiting for heart surgery, Brooke. Her face collapsed. I know. No, I do not think you did. I think my illness became a number that threatened the wedding you wanted, and you solved the conflict by deciding my boat should pay instead. You love that boat more than us sometimes. That boat never asked me to prove I loved it by sacrificing my life. She stood. That is disgusting. Sit down, Cole said. She stared at him. Whose side are you on? He answered. The side where your father was sick. The word father made her start crying harder. Diane reached for my hand. I pulled mine back. Her face crumpled. What about us? She asked. What about our marriage? I set the final envelope in front of her. It contained a simple household budget I had created. From now on, we split personal spending. I will continue paying the mortgage because the house is mine and I can afford it. Shared utilities and groceries come from a household account we both fund. I am no longer paying Brooke's studio expenses, Tyler's restaurant costs, or family emergencies without discussion. That is a budget, Robert. I am asking about us. I know. Do you still love me? I took time before answering because I did not want cruelty to become honesty's disguise. Yes. She closed her eyes. Then can we fix this? Maybe. But love is not the problem. Trust is. I made one horrible decision. You made a decision, then you lied about it while I was too weak to get water. She sobbed. I was afraid I would lose everything. You were afraid of losing the house. I was afraid of losing my life. Nobody at the table moved. Outside, rain tapped against the screen porch. Marcus finally spoke. Robert, do you want me to leave? No. You drove my wife to Cleveland when I had a follow-up and stayed at the shop every night for 2 weeks. You are part of why the business survived. Eat your pie. He nodded once. Tyler stared at him and seemed to understand the contrast. Marcus was an employee who had shown up without calculating inheritance, rent, or business credit. Tyler was a son who had called my surgery a maybe. I carried my plate to the sink and said, "These are my boundaries. You can be angry, leave, or stay and rebuild something. But the old arrangement is over." Tyler left first. His chair scraped hard against the floor. "You were never my actual father anyway," he said from the entryway. Diane gasped. Brooke whispered his name. I looked at him. The sentence hurt exactly as much as he intended. That did not make it powerful enough to change my decision. "You are right about biology," I said. "Everything else was a choice. Mine lasted 12 years. I hope someday you understand what that means." He slammed the door. Brooke stayed another 10 minutes, crying into Cole's shoulder. Before leaving, she looked at me and said, "I cannot believe you would do this right before my wedding." I answered, "I cannot believe the wedding was in the room with you while I was waiting to find out if I would live." She had no response. Diane's sister took her coat quietly. Marcus helped me clear plates. Diane sat at the table staring at the photograph of Dad and me beside June. After everyone left, she said, "You wanted to hurt us tonight." "No, you played the recording. Because every conversation before this one allowed you to pretend I misunderstood. You could have told me privately. I tried privacy for 12 years. Privacy became the place where my value changed depending on whether I was listening. That night I moved into the guest room where I'd overheard them. Diane asked why I would sleep in the room that carried the memory. "Because I wanted to become a room again," I said, "not a crime scene in my head." I removed the intercom from the wall the next morning, not dramatically. 2 screws, 1 wire connector, 10 minutes. I patched the hole and painted over it. Healing sometimes begins with ridiculous home maintenance. After Thanksgiving, Tyler accused me of sabotaging him. When anger did not change the rent, he sold a motorcycle, cut costs, and financed a smaller equipment package without me. The restaurant survived. 3 months later, he texted, "I hate more that I called your surgery a bad investment." I saved that message. Brooke cut nearly $20,000 from the wedding. 6 weeks later, she came alone and apologized for treating my belongings like family resources while treating Diane's security as untouchable. "Because you always gave," she said. She admitted some part of her had assumed I would somehow solve my own emergency and still walk her down the aisle. "I did," I said. "And I still will if you want me there," she cried. "Why?" "Because a boundary is not the same thing as abandonment." I walked Brooke down the aisle in May. Her wedding was beautiful. Smaller than originally planned, warmer than the spreadsheet version. She paid the remaining expenses with Cole. Tyler came but sat several rows back. Diane and I were still trying to understand whether our marriage had enough honesty left to rebuild. At the reception, Brooke gave a short toast. She did not tell everyone the surgery story. She did not turn my pain into content. She simply said, "My dad taught me this year that love is not the person who removes every consequence. Sometimes love is the person who stays while requiring you to grow up." Then she looked at me. "Thank you for staying." I cried. 2 weeks after Brooke's wedding, Tyler asked to meet before his restaurant opened. He gave me an old photograph of us repainting his bedroom. On the back, he had written, "Biology did not teach me to drive, show up to games, pay for school, or build my first kitchen. I said something designed to erase 12 years because I was angry. I cannot erase the 12 years. I told him I did not need the title dad. I needed a relationship that was not alone. He did not ask me to lower the rent. That mattered more than the photograph. Diane's repair was the hardest because marriage asked for a different kind of trust than parenthood. She began counseling without asking me to attend. Months later, she asked if I would join. The first session was terrible. She said she had spent years terrified of financial insecurity after her first divorce and had unconsciously treated my stability as something permanent. When my illness threatened it, she panicked and protected the assets instead of the person who created the stability. "I thought if you died, I would lose you and the house and the future," she said. "So I tried to reduce the number of things I might lose." Hearing it stated plainly hurt, but truth that arrives late can still be useful if it stops asking to be called something prettier. I told her the lie about the bank was worse than the fear. "You looked at me and let me believe no option existed because you wanted me to die without knowing you had chosen not to help," she cried. Yes, that was the first time she said yes without an explanation behind it. We rebuilt through boring things: separate personal accounts, shared household expenses, counseling, no private commitments to the kids, and me speaking before resentment hardened. Trust grew slower than love. That felt appropriate. Walter still owns June. The following summer, he took me out on Lake Hartwell and offered to sell her back. I surprised myself by saying no. With my hand on the mahogany wheel Dad and I had refinished, I felt gratitude instead of grief. June had saved my life with the money and then taught me that no object, house, business, or family role is worth more than the person carrying it. I bought myself a smaller used fishing boat the following spring. Aluminum hull, ugly seats, no history. Tyler helped replace the trailer lights without being asked. Brooke brought sandwiches. Diane sat beside me at the launch. Nobody took pictures. Nobody called it healing. We just went fishing. My relationship with the kids is different now. Tyler pays market rent and runs his restaurant without my credit. Brooke moved her bridal business into a rented studio. Both still call me Dad. I do not use their worst conversation as a weapon, and they do not pretend it never happened. Diane and I are still married. That may disappoint people who prefer clean endings. I considered leaving. I may have been justified, but self-worth did not require me to choose the harshest consequence available. It required me to stop choosing myself last. Staying became acceptable only after staying stopped, meaning surrender. If Diane had continued lying, defending, or demanding that I restore the old financial arrangement, I would have left. She did not. She changed enough that the marriage became a choice again rather than a habit. The guest room wall where the intercom used to be is smooth now. If you did not know where the speaker had been, you would never find the patch. I know. I can still see the outline when afternoon light hits it from the side. Some damage is like that. Repair does not mean invisible. It means the wall can hold weight again. I used to think being a father meant proving every day that I would never leave. After my surgery, I learned fatherhood also means refusing to disappear inside the people you love. I had confused support with rescue, generosity with obligation, and being needed with being valued. My family had learned the same confusion from the other side. Tyler believed my credit was part of his business plan. Brooke believed my income belonged in her wedding spreadsheet. Diane believed my stability was the ground under her life, and panicked when the ground suddenly became human. The kitchen conversation did not create those beliefs. It exposed them. That is why I no longer wish I had pressed the intercom button sooner. If I had interrupted, they would have apologized before telling the truth. I needed to hear the truth once, not because I wanted ammunition, because I needed to stop arguing with a feeling I had ignored for years. I was loved, but I had also been used. Those things can exist together, and admitting the second does not erase the first. It simply tells you where boundaries belong. The most important thing I sold that week was not my father's boat. It was the idea that keeping everyone comfortable was the price of keeping them close. June cost me 8 years of Saturdays. That illusion cost me 12 years of saying yes before anyone had to ask twice. I would buy the boat back before I would buy the illusion again. So tell me honestly, if you were lying upstairs waiting for heart surgery and heard the spouse and grown children you had supported for more than a decade deciding that saving your life was too risky financially, would you rebuild those relationships if they genuinely changed? Or would hearing that conversation permanently end the family for you?